Do you expect Kellen Moore to decrease his menu, or do you expect Sirianni to allow a bigger menu, basically?
I think this is Kellen Moore's show. I think Sirianni will be able to veto things if he doesn't like them, but it's just a very different dynamic. I think Kellen Moore will be in charge of all the offense. Sirianni will have input. That instead of veto, input. That's a better way to put it.
Knowing my luck as a Cowboys fan, Kellen Moore is just gonna average like 50 points a game this year. So yeah, at least you have that going for you. Well, yeah, at least you have that going for
9 games of 100 points and 8 games of 0.
The high highs and the low lows.
Yeah.
No doubt.
I put a picture of a flower up, right? And the only way the roots grow out every single day, keep watering and look at yourself first and know if are you watering and are you fertilizing every day.
And welcome back to the latest and greatest episode of the Shaving Points Podcast. My name is Jayden May, joined as always by my co-host Quentin Crisco, and a very special guest tonight to help us break down the NFC East and talk some Eagles. We have Mr. Sam Finkel. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk some ball with you guys. I really appreciate you having me on.
And Sam, do you want to tell any of the listeners, any of the viewers, a little bit about yourself, your background, and where they can find your stuff?
Yeah, sure. So my football experience, I started out as a recruiting assistant at Penn State, ended up being an undergraduate assistant with the quarterbacks, and from 2017 to 2020, then I went to law school and I started writing for Inside the Birds, and I currently do sports law. And I got to give the obligatory lawyer, don't take this as legal advice, even though I don't think anyone was going to derive legal advice from this, but I have to say it anyway. But that's me. You can follow me on Twitter with Sam_Finkel or check out my articles on Inside the Birds.
I think a good place to start is just always asking, where do you think the strength of this team lies? Like, what do you think the one area you can count on for this roster is?
You know, I'd never thought I'd say this, especially after last year, but I think it's the corner room. I feel really good about that area. And part of the reason I feel so good about it is because we're probably going to have to cut somebody who might start on another team, or at least be a top depth option. You know, it just feels like there is a lot of strength in that room, and it is young. I think that's a good point, but I feel very confident about it.
Interesting. So where do you think James Bradbury, like, does he have a spot on this roster? Do you think he's a guy that you're kind of talking about that might end up someplace else?
So my gut instinct is he's probably gone. I know they were talking about potentially moving him to safety, and there were some talks about trying to rework the deal, or who knows, but I think there is a spot if he's willing to go back to the bargaining table. I'm not sure he necessarily has to. I was a big critic of him. I wrote an article that was one of the more negative ones I wrote about how his performance was, but I mean, everybody has bad seasons, so I still think he has some football to play.
Man, I was really conflicted on his tape because it was like, the guy's still playing some good ball, right? But then there's moments where it's just like, can't do that, right? It's like he's just a step slow, and that's all it takes. Like when Jay, who's the Cowboys' number 3 wide receiver right now?
Jalen Tolbert.
When Jalen Tolbert is killing you up and down the field all game, that's a problem, right? Yeah. Like, the speed is not there for him to like catch up. But then there's like these moments where he's making these really nice pass deflections and stuff at the same time. And it's like, makes me want to believe it's still there. But I think once you lose that step, you lose that step.
Especially that corner.
Yeah, for sure. But I think there's a natural progression to that safety spot then that could be utilized. Problem is the safety room is a little questionable too. Like, that, where would he necessarily fit?
So you're expecting Quinyon Mitchell to be starting in Bradbury's spot on the outside?
I would love to see that. Quinyon Mitchell was my CB1 this year, and I was cheering on the draft that we got him. It was an awesome selection. We met him down at the Senior Bowl, and I really enjoyed talking to him. I actually thought he had one of the best performances, at least on that first day that I was down there. Maybe it was the second day, but regardless, I really love what he brings to the table, and I think he could start pretty instantly. And I feel pretty comfortable having him out there.
Man, at the Senior Bowl, he was like a bit of a measuring stick out there for when a receiver started doing well, a coach would pull him over and be like, try against this guy. See if you can beat this guy. Like, you love to see that in a guy at the Senior Bowl. It's just like he is the standard out there. That's what he was at this year's Senior Bowl, which is really exciting to add on to your team. Now, I'm curious to see how Fangio meshes him into it, because he played so much off coverage at Toledo. And thinking back to Kyle Fuller with the Bears, who was much more comfortable in off coverage, Fangio found ways to work that in with Kyle Fuller eventually. But Fuller kind of had to earn it first. Like, he had to earn the right to be able to play the way he wanted to play. So do you think there's going to be kind of a learning curve for him? I mean, there's always learning curve for rookie corners, but do you think there's, like, to any Eagles fans, like, how would you temper their expectations early for them to be able to put up with maybe some missteps that I think inevitably might get out there?
For sure. I think there's 2 points. First off, again, what you were saying, rookies will make mistakes. Like, that is a natural thing that you should expect for rookies. They're not perfect. They're rookies for a reason. So I think right off the bat, that's something that should be said. Another thing that we were talking about a little bit before this, but Fangio's defense is one of the trickiest defenses out there. It's a tough, there's a lot of rules to it. And it does rely heavily on the corners, especially because it should be a base nickel defense. There's going to be another corner out there. So that leads to more opportunities, but it also leads to more reliance on the position. And for someone who hasn't played at that game speed, he also played at Toledo. So like, there's going to be a huge adjustment, and you got to expect it. But I do think he has the tools to figure it all out. So I just think they need to be a little patient with him, but I do think it is going to be something that is worth seeing out.
I know the guy who you're saying they were going to run like a base nickel defense. I know the guy who they're going to be playing in nickel, Cooper DeJean, Jay loved coming into this draft.
Eagles take all the players I love in a draft.
Well, I had him as CB3 too. I really liked DeJean.
I just love the idea of like Cooper DeJean Cowboys jerseys would have flown off the shelves.
You hear that, Eagles fans? That's a challenge. We got to start buying some DeJean jerseys.
Yeah, got to, man. I mean, it would have like, and if he was bad, they probably would have sold more just for the bit. Like,
no doubt.
We were talking about like franchises that like where you would see DeJean jerseys for like the rest of your life. It was like Cowboys, Patriots, like Steelers, like just those old school franchises, just with the white corner out there. It's just like, oh yeah.
No, so, for sure. And I think
we'll see DeJean jerseys for a long time to come in Philly.
Fingers crossed. But I don't know if he's going to play nickel right away. I do think he'll get snaps, but I think there's a lot of competition there. I mean, we re-signed Devonta Maddox, who I still think has a lot of game in it, but there's a reason why he was cut earlier.
Eagles re-sign everybody.
Yeah, we do that. Howie Roseman, you figured this all out.
Looking back at the safety room here,
sure.
I mean, so Reed Blankenship was kind of a guy who came up out of nowhere and almost feels like a stabilizing force back there. What do you think of him and his play that you've seen?
Yeah, I love his physicality. Listen, he's not a superstar, and we don't need him to be. But he plays hard. He's smart. He does a really good job at getting to the football at the right time. And he's going to be a very useful player for the Eagles, and definitely someone that I do think they're going to rotate a little bit at safety, but I do think he'll probably get most of those snaps at that position. I know return of CJ GJ is huge, but you can put him anywhere too.
Mm-hmm. In one of the things in Chicago that Fangio did such a good job with was getting his safeties into late rotations. And a big part of that was Eddie Jackson's ability as a late rotating safety. Is there any safety in this room that you feel like has the skill set, the feel in space to be good with that? Or is there kind of is going to be a mix of guys going around?
I'm hesitant to say that there is a guy right now to do that. I think CJ has all the ability to do that, but I still think because he's like so versatile, there's some kind of like, he has to learn a little bit of everything. And so I think he could become that, and I think he should become that. But I think that I can't really outright say that right now. And a guy like Sidney Brown would be cool too, but he's also, I think, learning. And luckily, because of the transition from Desai to Fangio, it's not that huge of a transition. But I'm sure that there's some Fangio wrinkles that are going to have to be learned and will be a little difficult for that transition, especially with the late rotation or anything kind of like that. But it is a staple, you're right. And I do think that'll be used. I don't know it would be to Eddie Jackson's level right now.
One last question I got on the DB room. Like, we got Darius Slay here. I think Darius Slay is still fine. Like, I've been on record, and I still will stay on record. I think Slay has always been a tad overrated because he has an incredible nickname. But he's a good football player. I just thought James Bradbury was the better cornerback for the last few years until this past year. Now, behind him, we've already talked a little bit about the rookies. What's going to happen with Kelly Ringo? Kelly Ringo?
Kelly.
Yeah, it's tough because there's also Ricks and there's Josh Jobe. There's so many. There's going to be a casualty of at least maybe two of those guys, if not all three, if not one. But so I don't know. I think it really is going to depend on how they show out at camp and who can really get a feel for what Fangio is looking for.
I think if Kelly Ringo went to like Mississippi State or like Kentucky, his name wouldn't carry nearly the weight it does. I feel like he gets more benefits from being a Georgia Bulldog than just about any Georgia Bulldog. I didn't really like him in the draft. I know a lot of people like he was very kind of polarizing coming in.
Yeah,
and then
I was kind of like in the third round.
Yeah, was it third round? I couldn't remember where he went.
I think so too.
But he was getting projected anywhere from late first to fifth round. So like nobody really knew. I felt like late third, early fourth was kind of where he would end up anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think he got the most benefit from being a Georgia Bulldog.
Oh, you mean the Philadelphia Bulldogs?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I do think that is a thing too, but I mean, there's a reason why he was considered as a top prospect at one point. People projected him to be there.
Oh yeah.
And I think he still has that ability in him, and I think it just takes a little bit more development. And the thing is, are the Eagles going to put that in? Are they going to be able to? Like, of course they'd want to, but are they going to have the luxury of that?
Also seems like a guy that might need reps, and it's like, where are you going to get the reps in this DB room?
Exactly. I think that's a really good point.
I understand why you say this is the big strength. I didn't see it that way coming into this, so I was a little surprised. But looking through it again and thinking through, like, there's just a lot of talent and opportunity in this room at the same time, which I understand where you're coming from. Of the competition brings out the brightest, right?
Yeah, I honestly was thinking about it, and there are a lot of strengths to this team, but this is a room that I feel really comfortable even just rotating the guys, that you're going to get some good performance out of them every time.
Can't be any worse than last year.
Exactly. And the Eagles have historically not really had a great cornerback room, so I really wanted to, shine a light on that this year because I feel very optimistic about this room.
All right. Well, moving it over to another Georgia Bulldog, Nakobe Dean in the linebacker room, adding Devin White as well, and picking up, the legacy pick, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. What do you think of this linebacker room, and how much do you think it's going to matter in the grand scheme of this defense, what this room is able to add?
So I think foundationally, linebacker is a position that the league doesn't necessarily value, but I know for a fact the Eagles don't necessarily value, which could be a mistake because it is the weakest position, I think, of the entire Eagles roster. But if you think about it, we only have two linebackers out there at a time. At least we did last year, and I anticipate it to be similar this year, just because it's still a Fangio system. But I do think the additions are interesting. I don't feel super confident about them. I think it's still a very weak spot. I can tell you why on each player why there's a problem. I think you can start with Nakobe Dean. He can't stay on the field, and I'm super hesitant to call a player injury prone because it's kind of less of a thing.
Would he be considered injury prone or injury riddled? Because he basically just had one major injury, but it's like can he recover from that? It's not like it's like a hamstring one week, an ankle the next week, a shoulder after that.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think injury riddle would be a more appropriate term, and I agree. And they always say like the best ability is availability. Well, I don't always 100% agree with that. It is an important point, and I think he's kind of on his last legs. Like you got to prove it, right? So like, can you stay on the field? So I think this is a big year for him, and because of that, I'm hoping that he'll be motivated to like really rehab and to prioritize. Not that he wouldn't be already, but I'd like to see what he's capable of actually, because we really haven't seen what he can do, and what we have seen hasn't been that necessarily that impressive.
Yeah, I think we only saw one full season of him at Georgia, because he's had that back lingering for I think his last 2 full years at Georgia. So I mean, that's one of those things. Kind of like you see some other linebackers like Leighton Vander Esch. Whenever he got hurt, it was just came back. He was fine, but it just takes him early.
Yeah, it's a shame. And I think Vander Esch was an awesome player too. So like, it's a shame that this position is just a very violent position, and that's part of the reason why there's less value, because you have to replace them so frequently.
Now,
Bears love them some linebackers.
Devin White is a violent man.
Oh, I was hoping we got to him next.
Yeah, I'm not sure he knows what he's doing some of the times, but whatever he's doing it with very violent intentions.
100%.
Was Devin White, was he the Steeler or the Buccaneer? I can't keep up with my Devins.
He was a Buccaneer.
Okay. Yeah, much better than the Steeler Devin. Which one is that? Devin Bush. They're in the same draft, and they just always threw me off.
Me too. I had to think about it when I switched to this slide. I had to think about it.
So Devin White played for LSU, and he was like an early to mid first round pick, I believe. Devin Bush was later, I want to say, in the first round.
I think Devin Bush went 10.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow,
like
that's
that.
crazy.
He was
That's
from
crazy.
Michigan, I believe.
Yeah, he was from Michigan.
Yeah. Well, yeah, going to the same. I just always noticed the Buccaneer Devin and the Steeler Devin.
That's cool. They probably never shucked that comparison either. That's kind of interesting.
The main takeaway I've ever had from watching Devin White play football is that he is just decapitating people.
Which, by the way, Philly fans love that, especially when there's a star on the helmet. They particularly
also
love that.
Playing alongside Levante David for as long as he did can never hurt anybody.
Sure.
It gave him a lot. I felt like in Tampa he was almost used as like an agent of chaos a lot of the times, where it wasn't like he.
Well, when
he
you have a
loose
Levante David on your team,
responsibilities,
you can just kind of let
and he
another
could
guy
just
run
slide.
loose. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly. But precisely, I feel like that was kind of his role.
Levante might be the most criminally underrated player in the league.
I totally agree. I think that's a really good point. Yeah.
But let's get back over to some more Georgia Bulldogs, where we got Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and Nolan Smith along the defensive line, and a bunch of other names. Those are just the Georgia Bulldog aspects of it. What are your macro views of this defensive line?
So I think first off, the hardest thing will be replacing Fletcher Cox. And I don't think the Eagles are going to necessarily be able to do that. And I think the only way you're going to be able to do that is try to replace his production in the aggregate. And so you're going to have to just have a bunch of guys coming in and try to fill that role. And I think losing Fletcher Cox is a huge deal for the Eagles. Like, I think it is especially for that defensive line. The continuity aside, I think the production is going to suffer a little bit this year.
I mean, I can see that. We were talking a little bit pre-show. I was in watching tape and prep for this. I somehow got the idea in my head that Jordan Davis wore number 91 at one point. You watch enough tape, you can start to believe just about anything. So he was getting like robot mode a little bit. And I'm sitting here going like shaken out of it. Like, Jordan Davis is making plays left and right. Like, when did this start? And then I go look at the Eagles roster, go, 91 is Fletcher Cox. Fletcher Cox is making plays left and right. Like, this guy was like 34 years old and he was still everywhere. And now,
Never stops.
Yeah, I'm shocked that he retired with how well he was playing.
He's still a lot of football left if he wanted it.
Yeah. But so is Jalen Carter going to be able to answer the bell, you think? Or do you think he's going to get a step closer to reaching his potential? I loved Carter in that draft, and I think the world of his talent. But
I still love Jalen Carter. Yeah, I think he is the closest on the defensive line to reach that potential for sure. I'm the most optimistic about him. And I think he showed this season like why he could be that kind of player. Not necessarily as frequently as you would have liked, but I also think you kind of do get overshadowed by having someone like Fletcher Cox. And I'm hoping through like osmosis he could absorb some of that knowledge and can wreak havoc the same way Fletch did.
So
and,
his decline in production later in the season, I know he was like battling some injuries. You don't. I mean, it's a rookie, so rookies can come out hot, and then the league kind of catch up with them pretty quick. Especially, you're not used to the wear and tear, especially like from Sunday night games to Thursday night games, and then just constant going. So, do you think that had more to do with it, or do you have any worries at all as him as a professional? I guess is probably the best way to put it. I mean, nobody's holding you accountable. You're kind of on your own. Because, I mean, I think that was like the biggest kind of red flag on him going into the draft, and where a defensive lineman went number 1 overall. And, I mean, that was kind of his red flag that let him fall as far as he did.
Sure. And you know what? You do hope that. And really, the only way you're going to know is if you watch. And personally, and I'm trying to be as unbiased as I can, I do think...
Oh, we're nothing but unbiased on this show.
Yes, of course. I could tell. But I think that he's a rookie, and I think I definitely would like to attribute that to wear and tear and just trying to understand the game. And I do think we'll see, or at least I hope we'll see sustained success this season.
I'll say I disagree. I think he just don't got it. Some people got it, some people don't. I just don't think he got it.
Well,
but
I think I've
been wrong plenty of times before.
I'm more concerned about Jordan Davis not having it. That's where
I would say that's almost close to accepted reality at this point, and it's just on him, because like when that dude wants to play ball, my God, that dude plays ball.
Sure. And he looked pretty good for the last pictures that they were coming out with him.
Yeah.
It looks like he's lost some weight and, really
everybody's
defined
a Hall of
himself.
Famer in training camp.
Of course, yes. We were talking about that before too.
So back to the one thing I want to say about Jalen Carter. I think some of the drop off in the second half is a little bit over discussed, because you're talking about a rookie who went from being a top 5 defensive tackle in the NFL to a top 25 defensive tackle in the NFL. A rookie who stays top 25 defensive tackle in the NFL for an entire season is praised, right?
100%.
So it's not like the second half of the season he was becoming a guy you couldn't start. He just was no longer that top 5 player in the NFL.
Well, I think you can attribute that to a lot of different things too. Like that second half of this year was so terrible for pretty much the entire Eagles team. I mean, there was all this stuff coming out about, problems in the locker room. They switched from Desai to Patricia. The defense was horrible altogether, but the offense couldn't stay on the field either. So you were just getting a lot more volume. And, I think that there's a lot of things that can defend that. And I do think I think because of how dramatic a shift it was from 5 to 25, that is part of the reason it's highlighted. But I really, honestly, I wish they would just put that rest of that season to bed, like bury it. It happened, it happened, and
yeah.
They should be held accountable, but I wouldn't necessarily use that to project how they do this year.
Tell me a little bit about Milton Williams, because I didn't watch tape back when he was drafted. I just oohed and ahed at the shiny numbers from the combine, and I was like, I want that. It's a contract year for him, big spot for him with snaps to fill with Fletcher Cox gone. What is there to expect from Milton Williams this year?
So this is kind of what I was hoping to talk about with him and kind of Jordan Davis together, right? So I think that those guys together might be able to create some of the production that you would get from losing Fletcher Cox. So Fletcher Cox was good at every single facet of defensive line. We know that Jordan Davis is limited in some ways, right? There obviously has a lot of the intangibles, but I think Milton Williams has a lot of intangibles too. And I think the two of them are complementary to each other, right? So what Jordan Davis is really good at, Milton Williams is not as good at, but I think that what Milton Williams does really well, Jordan Davis struggles at. So I think having those two guys being able to play off of each other, you're never going to get that output of Fletcher Cox, but it's going to be as close as the Eagles can create this year. And so that's the thing I'm really excited about, is because I think Milton Williams really does a good job complementing what Jordan Davis does, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Has Moro Ojomo put some meat on his bones?
I hope so. I want to see a little bit more of him, hopefully. I think there's going to be a big rotation, so I think he'd be an important and cool name to see.
That dude flew around at Texas, man. He was fun to watch. Now, in the edge rusher room... in the edge rusher room, Hassan Reddick gone. Bryce Huff comes in. Very exciting player, very unproven player, but I mean, unproven's probably inexperience. Inexperience is the better word, because whenever he's been on the field, he wreaks havoc, but it's just like he never got on the field enough to almost know the risks of his play. Like, it's almost like he's a shiny toy that you see through the window, but you can't tell that there might be something wrong with it on the other side. I'm not quite sure. Like, sure. I like Bryce Huff a lot. I want him to be a Chicago Bear, but I was also nervous about it the whole time I was hoping for it.
Sure. And I mean, you're putting up a lot for that prospect, right? So like, it's kind of tough. First off, shout out to Hassan Reddick, fellow Temple guy. I love that. Very thankful for what he did for the city. You know, he definitely always played his heart out, even hurt.
Where did he end up?
He ended
New
up,
York
where
Jets.
did he? Yeah. Because it was basically a swap, essentially, at the end of the day.
Didn't have to change colors.
Yes.
Colors.
But did have to go to Jersey.
Just play with Quentin Williams.
Yeah, but Jersey,
Philly, I mean, it's basically the same place.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't think our any of your Philly listeners would love to hear that.
That border, 1 mile south of me, that is a different place.
Growing up in Texas, where it's like 45 miles to get anywhere. When I'm up in Philly, and I'm like, oh, Jersey's just right there. I'm like, it's basically the same town. People call like DFW like Dallas and Fort Worth. I mean, there's a good 20 miles between them.
For sure, but there's definitely some Philly Jersey rivalry, and I say that lovingly because I'm going to spend my weekend in the Jersey Shore, so I mean, you can take that.
It's a good time up there, but yeah, it's just crazy how how close everything is up in the Northeast, and then like you hear about. Cause I never spent much time up there until probably about 5 years ago. Everything's so much different, like the Baltimores to the Phillies and New York, New Jersey. Like they all just seem like you just think of distance in Texas. You're like, man, they must be pretty far away. Then you get up there, you're like, oh, I can go all of these in a day. To where like I have people in Philly from Philadelphia or Northeast come down here and like, oh yeah, let's go see the Alamo in San Antonio, then drive down to Houston, and then like we'll go to Dallas. I'm like, that's a 3-day trip, brother.
It's harder to visualize for us. I mean, we're so used to being able to go everywhere. So for sure,
it's just funny. But yeah, I just had to throw that in there and get.
Oh, of course.
But so
rowdy fans going.
What type of snaps do you expect from this edge room for these different players?
Yeah, well, first off, look, can I go back to Bryce Huff for 1 second?
Yeah.
I just want to say, I think the volume concerns are legit because we don't know, right? But I think that role is made for him. Like, I think he slots in perfectly, and I think the defense will really shine because it's a pretty solid defense all around, and if he can produce even close to what he was doing last season, maybe even half that production over a greater volume, I think he could be a star for the team. And I think he has the athleticism to do it. And I'm excited to see what he can do.
Because you mentioned the role, what's the role that you're talking about? Like, what is that exactly?
Sure. I kind of see him slotting into that Hassan Reddick role, right? Of just, coming off the edge and being able to sometimes coverage, but really not. It's really just that
featured pass rusher role.
Exactly.
For the most part. Like, I think of it from the Bears standpoint, it's not the Leonard Floyd role, it's the Khalil Mack role.
Exactly. And I'm not going to say he's Khalil Mack because
No. Yeah, but the role of like, why would you not have this guy rushing the passer? Because
Exactly.
Anyone unfamiliar, like Vic Fangio is going to spend a lot of time with 3 down linemen and a edge rusher linebacker flanked on each side, and you don't know which one's coming.
Right.
So, like, more often than not, it's going to be the featured pass rusher.
Was that Lance Briggs?
No, Lance Briggs was a real linebacker, friend. You don't want to open up that can of like my anger at Pro Bowl voting for not voting Lance Briggs in because Sean Merriman had 20 sacks.
I'm kind of here for it. I'm here for it.
Stir the pot, boys.
We got to
stir the
pot. One thing that I'm interested in with this edge room, really, really interested to see, is can Nolan Smith add weight? Because when he was a high school recruit, from the time when he was recruited out of high school until he was drafted, I want to say he only gained like 8 pounds.
That's crazy.
And well, it was his 24/7 profile was barely heavier than his draft profile, which was insane. I was like, I watched this guy's tape, and I did see shades of Khalil Mack in the way that he played football. But I was like, can he add the weight? That was my main question with him. And if he can add the weight, I think he's tailor-made for a Vic Fangio defense. But that's just still my big question.
The other thing is you also have to build the weight correctly, right? Because you don't want to lose any of that explosiveness. Or
no, he's definitely had bad weight.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Davis, unfortunately, that was kind of what happened last year. Not to be too speculative, but that's kind of what all the reports were saying. So yes, he has to build that weight, but he has to do it properly. And I'm hoping the Eagles' strength and conditioning staff, has a good plan for him, and we can see that come to fruition. Because I do think you're right. I think he is perfect for that Fangio system, and I'd love to see it. But again, I do think I don't think it necessarily has to be that as much weight, but I think it would improve his game significantly. It would raise his ceiling for sure. But I don't think it's contingent on his success in the defense, I'd say, if that makes sense.
And I'm just thinking about it from the standpoint of like, he is such an animal against the run and so good with his hands. But it doesn't matter when you're 230 pounds. It just won't matter. He can't play Sam backer. He can't be on the strong side of the formation trying to take on a tight end or even a tackle at times in the run game because he's just too light, which means he has to be on the weak side, which makes him your designated pass rusher. But that's what Bryce Huff is here to do. So like that, to me, that being able to add that effective mass, that good mass is such a key for him to see the field. Because if not, I mean, I feel like you see more Brandon Graham, and I'm not even sure how you divvy up these snaps between Josh Sweat and Bryce Huff as a designated pass rusher, as the weak side guy.
And now they got Jalix Hunt too, and Vaughn, and there's a bunch of guys. Yeah, and I'm excited. He's very raw though, so I don't think he's going to get that many snaps. But here's hoping.
He'll be a Hall of Famer.
I mean, he has a Hall of Fame name already, right? Like that's kind of
Jalix Hunt.
But no, I think the one thing I love about this defense is I think there's a lot of versatility at almost every position. But with that, there becomes a point where you're too role indefinite, right? You don't have guys in defined roles, and it makes it hard when everybody has to like cover different positions. Mm-hmm. And that's
hard
a strength,
to get good
right?
at something you only practice half the practice in.
Exactly.
Or like a third of the practice in.
One good thing is that one of the quarterbacks in the division is a rookie, and I mean, Washington's not the easiest team. I mean, they got a lot of talent there, but put the stamp of guarantee on it that Vic Fangio is just going to make his life an absolute hell. So never easy to win in the division, but you can almost pencil that one in already just because of that alone.
Hey, knock on wood. From your, hopefully it's right.
I feel like the Eagles' history with the Commanders has been iffy the last few years of like a lot of near heartbreak and like how like that kind of feeling.
It's gonna be a tough team this year. They're gonna be a real tough team. Can I just go over this offense in a whole real quick? If you just want to go back to the main page, before y'all get started because I got some takes here. All right, so you got Devonta Smith, you got A.J. Brown, you got Dallas Goedert, one of the best receiving trios in the league. You still have Jordan Mailata, you still have Lane Johnson on your bookends, Lane Dickerson at guard, Cam Jurgens, which I think is going to be a very serviceable center here, Jalen Hurts. You go out and sign Saquon Barkley. How terrified are you that this is going to be the weakness of your offense with Kellen Moore calling plays? Because that dude makes everything overcomplicated. I have a very, very strong feeling that this team's going to be heavily carried by this defense, and this offense is going to struggle really bad under this Kellen Moore offense. I don't think he fits Jalen Hurts at all in the slightest, and bringing in a brand new running back, like, tell me I'm wrong, but it's like you look at this offense and you love everything about it. Then you look at the guy scheming up plays, and he's an offensive genius that can't really put onto the field of what he actually wants to do. He overcomplicates everything, kind of puts his own mind in a pretzel at times. Like, if you go back and look at some of his time with Dallas, or even some of his time with the Chargers, there's times where receivers are running into each other on route combinations because he's seeing something different than that's actually on the field, to where receivers are seeing cover 2, he's projecting a cover 1 and stuff like that. So how terrified are you as an Eagles fan that you look at this offense that should be the best offense in the league, and it's gonna be brutal?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'll start here. It can't be worse than last year, because that
can't be worse than last year. But if I'm an Eagles fan, I'm terrified, because it's like, how much longer can you keep this core together? And then you go out and spend big money on a running back, kind of, I would say, outside of linebacker, probably the most replaceable position in football. You let DeAndre Swift go, who I'm very high on DeAndre Swift, but Saquon's a guy that we've seen flashes, and he was on a really bad team. So it's like, how much does he get elevated with a good offensive line, with some receiving threats, and a guy like Jalen Hurts next to him? But what does that take away from the proven guys on the team, if at all? Like, it's reminding me of, what was it, the 07 Dream Team, where it's just, you got all this talent, and I'm optimistic in this, but also trying to be like objective, and like, something about it's telling me it's not going to work.
So I can understand, especially after what we saw last year, why you say that. But I have so many points to what you said that I'm ready to go
off,
sure.
King. I mean, I'm definitely a hater, but I try to be objective when we're talking on the pod.
For
like,
sure.
I mean, if you just ask me just in a casual conversation, I'm going to say they're trash. But in all honesty, it's like, it should be the best offense in football, and I'm thinking they're going to really let y'all down.
Let's start top down. Ready? We'll start this thing top down. Let's start with Kellen Moore first off. Let's back it up. Let's talk about what happened last year. Let's really embrace this. I'm sorry, Philly fans, why we have to go through this again. I don't think it's Brian Johnson's fault. I really still think he is a good coach. I just don't think it was his time. I think having 2 rookie coordinators was a mistake. And I think the difference between Brian Johnson and Shane Steichen was Shane Steichen told Sirianni no. I think Sirianni had way too much control, and Brian Johnson was just a yes man.
Does that worry you about your head coach? Because
it very much does.
I feel like Philadelphia wants to like Nick Sirianni, but I feel like they've hated him the entire time he's been there, except for the Super Bowl run.
Yeah, I mean, they hated him from his first press conference. Right?
That's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah, but that's Philly.
That's also, it's like, is it Nick Sirianni or is it Philly?
It's a little bit. I thought it was fireable how bad last season was, and because I think it goes down to your highest guy, right? Like
Andy Reid might be the greatest coach of all time.
I know, and
he was in Philly for a long time and didn't get it done. So I mean,
we wouldn't have had a Super Bowl without firing him. As much as it pains me to say that, listen,
most likely,
most likely, yeah, you're right, because he
might have more if you would have kept him.
Who knows? But I'm just I'm happy we got one. But I'm not complacent, but I'm happy we got one. But so I am very concerned about Sirianni. I think there's a short leash on him this year. And I think bringing in Kellen Moore could potentially be an audition if Sirianni doesn't do well. Like, I wouldn't be. I really like Kellen Moore. I know you're not a huge
everybody loves Kellen Moore until he's in the building. I mean, I'm telling you, there's going to be 5 games this year where you're like, this man is the smartest man in the world. And then you're going to be
smart for his own good. Is that what you're?
Yes, you're gonna be playing. Let's say the Giants are like 1-9. I don't know when y'all play the Giants. When do they play the Giants, Q? You got their schedule right there?
I don't have it pulled up yet.
Oh, okay. Well, let's say they play the Giants like week 11, and the Giants have 1 win, and they're gonna
week 7 we play them.
Okay, yeah. So let's say you're playing a 2-5 or a 2-4 Giants team, and very first drive is a 3-and-out. He just something happens in his brain to where you'll score 55 the week before. You'll go 3-and-out to open up the Giants game and score 5 points. Like it's
quicksand.
It's infuriating. Like if one thing goes wrong, this dude just kind of turtles into a shell, and like you'll see wide receiver screen, halfback draw, follow. Then it's like, oh, that didn't work. Let's just try to throw it deep against like a 4 shell coverage. Like
how much of his game plan, or like if he has a script that's longer than a lot of other teams' scripts, where if something doesn't work the way that he needs it to in that script, not that every play needs to work perfectly, but he has ones that he probably needs more than others, it can throw off a lot. Yeah, and he's constantly trying to get back to that point the rest of the game. That's what it sounds like to me when Jay's describing.
Makes sense. No,
when he's on though, it's like, oh my god, this man is a legend. He's a god out here. Like, and then the next week you're just
Super rush, boy.
What is going on? Yeah, it's crazy. You'll feel the ups and downs. I'm just giving you a forewarning just ahead of time that.
I think I did do some like stats on him versus the league average in scoring, right? And
yeah,
he outperformed the league scoring 3 out of the last 5 years, and last year was one of the years he didn't, and there was a lot of injuries, and I think you can kind of attribute that to. And the other year,
trash.
We will not stand for Easton Stick issues on this podcast.
I'm glad to know where we stand on that. It's a really important issue. But then the other year, he was almost exactly even with league average. So he's doing something right in the aggregate. And I think,
aggregate, yes.
And I think
his highs are so high and his lows are so low. There's never just like, let's just go out and score 24 points, play good defense, and win the game.
But I think having the good defense will at least hopefully instill some confidence to make some...
Philly's a good team. I'm not sitting here saying like they're going to be sitting at 3-8 or nothing, but it's just there's gonna be some must-win games midway through the season. You're going to be in a tough division race, whether it's with the Cowboys or the Commanders. I'm really high on the Commanders, but you're going to drop some games where you're just like, why can we not score? It's like we have Devonta Smith, we have AJ Brown, we have Dallas Goedert, we have Saquon Barkley, we have Jalen Hurts. Like, why can we not score?
It makes sense, and that would be a valid concern. Listen, there's a short list of things that I just need him to do, and it'll be okay.
Yeah,
I just need him to pick up a blitz. I need him to be able to have a little bit of motion involved and some window dressing to these plays so he can have some easier reads for Hurts. And I just need him to not throw screens.
When he runs pre-snap motion, the offense is like a swan in water. And then the next week you'll have like 4 pre-snap motions the entire game.
Sure. But as long as he does it, because we didn't have any of those things last year, and it showed why it was a problem. I wrote an article about the Tampa game where I was saying if they blitz us, we are going to lose this game in the playoffs, and that's exactly what happened.
Well, that was just Baker legend.
Baker legend for sure. But
now I do want to get back to a little bit about what you were saying about not blaming Brian Johnson as much as Sirianni. Like, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I think a lot of the blame really just falls on Sirianni, and I think it's a kind of a more nuanced take, because I don't think a lot of even Eagles fans feel this way, because everyone was just like, we got to fire him. I think some of the play calling was limited to what Sirianni wanted. I think Sirianni limited the menu significantly and what was actually callable. And I think Brian Johnson was just trying to do the best with limited material, and because he didn't stand, and I do think not standing up for your offense is problematic, especially at the NFL level. But I think Sirianni had way too much control and too many hands in that offensive pot. So that's where I don't necessarily blame Brian Johnson, because I think anybody in his position without having the ability to expand on it would have done pretty much similarly to what he did.
Now,
that's the point.
Do you think some of that from Sirianni was essentially based in and tell me if I'm wrong about this with Steichen, but was based in the idea that Shane Steichen ran an offense that was a pretty limited menu out of a ton of different looks and alignments and personnel groupings, whereas do you think Brian Johnson was trying to get a much bigger menu out there? And do you think that's something that Kellen Moore, do you expect Kellen Moore to decrease his menu, or do you expect Sirianni to allow a bigger menu? Basically,
I think this is Kellen Moore's show. I think Sirianni will be able to veto things if he doesn't like them, but it's just a very different dynamic. I think Kellen Moore will be in charge of all the offense. Sirianni will have input. Instead of veto, input. That's a better way to put it.
Knowing my luck as a Cowboys fan, Kellen Moore is just gonna average like 50 points a game this year. So yeah, at least you have that going for you.
Well, yeah,
at least you have that going for
9
you.
games of 100 points and 8 games of 0.
The high highs and the low lows.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Let's get a little bit to Jalen Hurts, because
I was hoping.
To me, I mean, I hear all this with Kellen Moore, and it's his show. Kellen Moore is a genius, right? I don't think that's actually debatable. I think Kellen Moore is very good at drawing up plays, at designs, at concepts against certain looks.
I think football IQ, he's up there with just about anybody. He just kind of gets in his own head
situational feel and composure, I feel like, are the things that become more questionable for him.
And that's what Sirianni's good at. So that's why I'm hoping there's some synergy there. I want to see the best of the both. And it's not always going to be that way, but I think that there's a perfect synergy situation or opportunity.
So, is Jalen Hurts the guy?
Yes. Unequivocally. Yeah.
I mean, Carson Wentz basically won the MVP.
I know. Listen, Hurts was hurt last year for most of the year. I think there's going to be a regression to the mean this year. I think that what we saw was a much lower than average performance of Hurts. I think Hurts is going to – I'm not saying it's going to be as high as the 22 campaign, but what I'm saying is if you utilize his – listen, I will say this. Hurts is not a top 5 quarterback, and that's okay. You don't need to be a top 5 quarterback to win, but he has strengths that make him unique and that are very hard to stop. I was going to say
he's not top 5, and you can drop quite a bit lower than that too. But I mean, he's a fine quarterback. I mean, I kind of put him in that same like Dak Prescott area of like anywhere between like 9 and 13.
Perfect. Exactly. I think he's in the top third of the league.
Oh, absolutely.
And to be honest with you, that's a range for franchise guys where you can win the whole thing, especially if you mitigate the weaknesses and emphasize the strengths.
Kind of, you got to take Patrick Mahomes out of that equation, and then
for sure
it opens up the whole league. But between the Brady era and the Mahomes era, it's like, can you really win with a top 13 guy?
I know. And the thing is,
we've just been on a crazy
year
run
they
of
get hurt.
Dominant QBs. Yeah.
For sure. Mahomes is probably the most generational talent. Because I coach quarterbacks, and I can just tell you there's just no one like him.
Yeah,
and
we both went to Texas Tech, brother. We love us.
You were on the train waiting.
Yeah.
But we're witnessing greatness, and we got to appreciate it. And it hurt losing the Super Bowl to him, but like there's greatness.
One of my favorite Super Bowls ever.
But so with Hurts, my question is, we've seen him be on essentially a limited menu conceptually all his career at this point.
Sure.
And now you're throwing it up to Kellen Moore, who I can only assume has a 500-page playbook. How do you
Probably.
mitigate that? How do you problem solve with that?
Well, I think a lot of what Kellen Moore is probably doing in this time is talking to Hurts and seeing what he likes and what works well for him and watching the film. So I think Hurts is going to have some input into what is going to be obviously in that menu of plays and what is actually in the final playbook. And so I think Kellen Moore is really smart, and he's going to watch the film. He's going to see what Hurts is good at. And I think he's going to use a lot of those plays. But I think he's also going to say, like, he's going to see Hurts' comfort level with the concepts he has, right? So there's some things that he might see on film that Hurts is just not comfortable with. So I don't know if those plays will necessarily make it at the end. So I think it's working on that relationship and seeing what works best for the offense, for Hurts, and for Moore's designs. So I think that's the process that's ongoing right now.
Well, I mean, when you've got Saquon Barkley, Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, a lot of stuff's going to work.
For sure.
Like, these weapons are filthy. And, like, Jay was talking a little bit about Saquon earlier. I do not know that watching the Giants' offensive line from last year, it is up there with the worst offensive lines I've ever watched in my life.
Pretty much.
That's how bad it was. Like, no, I mean, last year was a special kind of bad.
Yeah.
Like, last year was
are y'all watching the
2010
mid-season Hard Knocks right now?
I've watched the clips of it. I
saw the clip earlier where the Giants GM called Saquon. He was like, "So what are you thinking?" He was like, "Well, I don't know." And he's like, "Well, we're gonna let you explore free agency. We're not gonna tag you or nothing." He was like, "Can you promise you'll give us a chance if you go somewhere else?" He was like, I've already let you know where I stand there. And then the next clip, they're like, "Oh, Saquon's in Philly. This is a nightmare."
Well, here. The thing that's funny about that is I know Saquon from when I was at Penn State.
Yeah.
And that is like the most assertive I've ever heard him ever. He's the most like mild-mannered, chill, down-to-earth person.
But can you imagine being that talented?
I know. Well, that is his assertive level.
Being that talented, and they're like, we're gonna franchise you, and we're gonna extend a very questionable quarterback that, like, whether or not, like, we don't even know if this guy can start in the league, much less garner an extension. I know it was kind of one of those, like, fake extensions, but it's like you still paid him. And being Saquon being like, I am this team, and like having to go through that, and then having like another year of just getting like brutally punished, and then the GM calling you, be like, "You promise you'll give us a chance if you go anywhere else?" Like, if I was him, I'd have been like, "No. Like, I'm gone, brother." Like,
that's the thing. Saquon is such a respectful person. Like, he doesn't. That's him. Like,
yeah, because you said you knew him personally. That was like the most assertive he's ever sounded. I watched it and I was like, man, this dude's way too nice.
I was like, that's who he is. He's.
I was like, this is outrageous. Like, I would have been like, hey, thanks for giving me the opportunity. Thanks for the money. Like, it's nothing against you personally. This team sucks. And I'm out of here.
I mean, he is a man of few words. Like, he did, especially like, but that's Saquon, and I'm so happy. I bought his jersey the second the pre-order came out. That was the first thing I did. I'm super excited.
Penn State jersey?
No, I bought the Eagles one as soon as it.
Gross.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this signing. It's probably one of the most exciting signings that I've ever seen.
Yeah, Yeah, that's always fun. Especially, is he a hometown guy, or did he just go to Penn State?
So he, I might butcher this. He's either from New York, and then he's from New York, and then played high school football in Pennsylvania, and lived in Pennsylvania for a little bit. His brother actually,
New York, Philly, New Jersey, it's all the same.
I don't know. I mean, a Texas guy for sure, but the rest of the world, I don't know. But no, his brother actually was at. I coached one of the summer camps that Penn State had, and he was there, and then he ended up going to Temple. I think he transferred, but it's kind of a cool cycle. But
that's cool.
One more thing about Saquon before we move on from him. I want to say, like, you guys aren't ready. The league's not ready for this. Like, It's just
Oh
he
my
he
God.
tried. The only knock on him is he does try to make things happen too much. And Miles Sanders did the same thing. It's just Saquon actually had the talent to really, shine in that role. But he doesn't have to do that anymore. So I'm very
The
curious to
league's
see
not ready.
that. Yeah, you can
We've
quote me on that.
we've seen prime Adrian Peterson.
I know.
Like the
But
league's ready.
I
think he's gonna be
personally,
very successful though.
I have not seen with my own eyes, like in person, I have not seen a better athlete. Micah is the only one that I would say is close to Saquon in terms of like pure athleticism. So I'm just excited that he's not against us.
Only if he stops podcasting.
Right.
Thanks, Malik Hooker. Anyways, from there, let's talk a little bit about the wide receivers. So,
Sure.
how would you describe the way that like Devonta Smith and AJ Brown kind of play off each other, their different strengths, and how their differences kind of make the offense move a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, Devonta Smith doesn't look like the way he plays. It's really weird. Like he can make these crazy catches and like can survive through contact. Like you just don't necessarily expect that from a guy his, build. And then you got AJ Brown who can just make magic happen as soon as the ball is in his hands. It's just a really cool 1-2 punch that you got between the two guys. One thing that I want to note with that I think is going to be different this year is AJ, according to PFF, I believe it was like 23.9, 24% slot percentage for AJ Brown. And then like it was like 31%, I think, for Devonta Smith. So I think, especially with Kellen Moore, you're going to be seeing AJ Brown particularly in the slot way more, maybe like at 40% even, because that's how you take advantage. You got to have him on some crossing routes, like some underneath stuff, and just get him the ball in space. And that's what you want to see with that. And then you have Devonta Smith, who I feel like really good on the outside. You feel very comfortable with that, who's just making these crazy catches and essentially is a improved version of a possession receiver, because he's not just a possession receiver. There's so much more he can do. But I feel much more comfortable with Devonta Smith making a catch, like a very contested catch, than pretty much almost anyone in the league. Like he's up there for me.
What makes the slot easier to create space for a player in?
Yeah, I just like it's where you have more space to work with, right? So like on the outside, there's really only one way to go.
Yeah, you're limited to the sideline where you're in the slot. You have essentially the whole field.
Yeah, because the defender has a two-way go basically, and
exactly
on the boundary they don't.
Yeah. And you can create mismatches. Usually, like especially not as much anymore, but when slot receivers were like thriving, maybe like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, when Wes Welker busted out of the scene.
Yeah, you see linebackers.
You had linebackers trying to guard Wes Welker in the slot, and it's just like, oh my goodness.
And then nickel became the new base.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like you see these micro adjustments over time that make it a little more difficult, but it's still a very hard position to play because of that two-way go potential.
So you look at this wide receiver room, and one of the best, if not the best, 1-2 wide receiver in the league. How worried about you are you with your 3, 4, 5 receivers in a situation of any missed time with your top 2 guys? I mean, I know you can still rely on like a Dallas Goedert, Saquon catch out of the backfield, but if you have to go any extended amount of time without one of these guys, how confident are you that one of these other guys can step up and be that guy for you if need be?
Sure. No, yeah, that would be it would be pretty detrimental to the team if one of those 2 guys go down for an extended period of time. I do think you can.
You're telling me John Ross can't be better than Patrick Mahomes?
Oh, I got some John Ross stories for you too in a sec. I listen. There was a guy that consulted at Penn State for a little bit who coached John Ross. He was in the NFL for a little bit, and he said that John Ross had all the talent in the world, but he hated football, and that was like the big.
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm not going to name the guy because I don't want to create any black. I'm sure this guy expressed that feeling to John Ross, but regardless, after seeing some of like him talking, like there was a clip of him talking about how he's refound his love of football. Let's assume that is factual. If that is factual, I know he's older, but I would love to see what somebody with his skill set who loves football can actually do. I don't think he's making up anywhere close to Devonta Smith or
I'm
AJ
sure the
Brown.
Bengals would love to see that.
I'm sure that the Giants too, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, so similar vein with the Giants, Paris Campbell. I'm a huge Paris Campbell guy. I love.
I think he's kind of got a raw deal so far in the league. I mean, I think he's got something there. I don't if he can carve out a good wide receiver 3 role, I think he can have some success for sure.
Especially with Kellen Moore, I think he could fill that role really well. The thing that really
Cedric Wilson comes to mind when you look at a guy like Paris Campbell.
Very much so. And Michael Gallup.
He was a true 2 whenever he was fully healthy. But yeah, I mean, just being the kind of the gadget guy, but he can also go out there and catch you about 50 balls. Like Cedric Wilson, that year before he signed with Miami, I mean, I would say he was one of the more important parts of that Kellen Moore offense, because I mean he was just making impacts all over the field, and then especially with the end arounds and stuff like that, you don't take the unnecessary hits with your 1 or 2 receivers. I mean he was more than willing to do that. Then he was just the gadget guy. I mean wide receiver throws and stuff like that on trick plays.
Well, I mean, I think he was signed in Miami to play the Tyreek Hill role, and then Tyreek Hill came available, and they were getting Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, and then also had Jalen Waddle. Yeah, he signed with Miami, and then they went out and got like 2 or 3 more guys, and he got buried, and really just never got the opportunity after that.
But so do you think that's something Paris Campbell here is going to get an expanded kind of role with Kellen Moore?
My concern with him, the only knock that I know he has the skill set. I mean, we saw it at Ohio State. We saw it in the preseason with the Colts and a little bit his rookie year. But the Colts and the Giants have had terrible receiver rooms, and he still has not been able to see the field. That's concerning.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think he's a guy that he could thrive in like a low wide receiver 2 if he has to be the 2. But like I think that being the 3rd option is kind of just the sweet spot for him. Like go out there, catch you 60 balls, but he could also run you the end arounds and kind of do all the grit work to say as far as the wide receiver position goes. So I mean, I think it's a huge addition to that team, assuming your guys can stay healthy.
100%. And the other guy that I'd mention, I just think is important in this conversation, is Anaya Smith.
He's a dog.
I think he could easily carve that 3 role out by the end of the season. And actually, I was talking to my buddy about this earlier.
We don't respect Texas A&M on this podcast.
An Aggie Eagle is the worst thing you can be to Jay.
Yeah, that's like the worst thing. Trying to think if there's any more. I'm blanking.
I mean, dude, Anaya Smith is an absolute dog.
Oh no, you're just gonna have Jalen Hurts and return it in the new return role.
Well, we're gonna trade for Justin Fields, we'll have Kenny Pickett do it. It's fine.
This is the legend himself.
He'll fake slide his way to a touchdown every
with
time
his tiny hands.
And then, real quick on the tight end room, is Dallas Goedert's skill set and all the RPOs that the Eagles have run in recent years, is that something that's pretty different than you think than a lot of tight ends? Are there a lot of reads for him within those, or is there a different type of awareness? Like I feel like he is such a key man in those. There has to be something a little more than meets the eye to his role.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that we do a lot of reads off that utilize his skill set off the RPO. I'm thinking of a couple in my head where we have a glance off to him. We definitely have utilized him that way, and he does have a really good, his footwork and the way he positions himself is pretty impressive, and I think cements him in the top range of tight ends. I feel very confident that he'll be able to, emulate this success this year. I feel like, especially with someone like Kellen Moore.
Also, the fact that he's named Dallas is because his parents were such Cowboys fans, and then he ends up in Philly and being a great player is just like a slap in the face to God. So I just want to say that.
And we drafted him in the Dallas draft. And I think, was that the David Akers speech? Was that the one where we took him?
And the Dallas was also going to draft him when you traded up one spot
That's
before.
awesome.
So, I mean, everything that falls into that is just, like, everything was setting up perfectly. Like, he was born to be a Cowboy. The draft was in Dallas. He was going to be a Cowboy. And then their biggest rival jumps ahead of him one spot, takes him, and he still is very, very good. So it's like, that might be one of, like, it's just Philly, like,
trolling
just
you guys,
disrespecting God. Like, God had everything planned out for him, or whatever higher power we're
treating Goddard
you tend
all right
to put your faith in.
Yeah, Dallas Goddard.
They were like, nope, we're changing fate. Like, it was written on the wall. It was all there. And then Philly's like, no, we're scumbags. We're gonna screw this up, and he's gonna be a Hall of Famer.
And we do it proudly. That's a very Philly thing to do, for sure.
I respect that.
All right, let's get to the O-line a little bit. And the first thing I want to ask about this is, I like Cam Jurgens. I do. But he cannot be Jason Kelce. Like, so what type of difference do you think that's going to be out there for this team for the first time in 15 years?
So, first off, this team wouldn't have won a Super Bowl without Kelce. It wouldn't have been even a contender without Kelce. So, I feel like...
Glad he's gone.
I am very sad. But
enjoy retirement, brother.
I hope he enjoys it too, but for different reasons. But the thing is,
Kelce. So I'm so glad he's gone.
I love him so much, and the city loves him, and he'll never have to buy a drink here ever again.
Is he the most beloved Philly athlete maybe ever?
I think so. I do. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, Dawkins is always going to be loved here too, but
Dawkins never won a Super Bowl.
I know. I think Kelce. I mean, I think Kelce, especially with all the other stuff going on with the Kelce family, like that becoming such a household name. Like,
him starting the podcast really bolstered his kind of Philly King claim,
and it boosted Taylor Swift's career. To be honest,
yeah.
Well,
I mean, imagine Taylor Swift trying to. Yeah, imagine Taylor Swift trying to sell out stadiums without dating a Kelce brother. Like, come on now. Like,
it wouldn't have happened.
They would be empty stadiums. She would just be singing to nobody.
But so on the field, how do you think this is gonna impact them?
So here's the thing, Jurgens. I'm just gonna be straight up with this. Jurgens was average to below average as guard last year. He just was. I mean, there was nothing that special with what he did. However, I think he's more naturally a center, which, again, having the versatility, again, could be a problem. We talked a little bit about that earlier. But Kelce made him the heir apparent. Kelce dubbed him with that role. He crowned him with that role. And he had another year in Stoughton University. And those two factors alone provide me with enough optimism to feel good about him being there. Will it be as good as Kelce? No. But I don't think anybody in the league would be able to make the impact that Kelce did. And I think there's... I knew you were going to say something like that. But seriously, like, I think that expectations should be tempered for the interior offensive line in general, because it's just not the same unit as last year. But especially at that center position. I mean, you're not going to have somebody who's going off a block to make another block to make another block on a huge run. Like, some of the IQ things, and I'm not saying Jurgens is not a smart person, but having that feel for the game and
familiarity aspect. Yeah. Like against Dallas last year, I was watching the tape, and everyone's walking up. They all, right as soon as they get set, boom, boom, snaps out. Like, his hand wasn't on the ball, and then the snap was out. Like that, Cam Jurgens isn't going to do that. That's what gives you a half step over the defense on that play. For sure. Little things like that just aren't going to be there. And that's a minuscule example. But it's just, I think that 100 times over the course of a season, things like that do add up.
They make a difference. And actually, another thing that you just reminded me of, Kelce's still going to be in the building. So I think Jurgens will be able to use Kelce as I'm not saying that's going to necessarily make his gameplay that much better. I think has like I know he's going to be doing his own things and
I mean he's doing media now, and then I'm sure he'll be around, but I mean is
he going to have a role with the team like formally? I don't think so, but I do think he has access. Like they said that they weren't going to stop his access, and I do think he'll be able to come in freely now
on a Tuesday,
right? Yeah, when he doesn't have his other stuff. And I do think Kelce is the person that would do that. I really feel like
it's so crazy. It's like as much of a Philly guy that he is now, growing up in like the Midwest and everything. It's so funny just how ride or die his wife is. Like they were talking to us like if he ever ended up on another team, like would you wear his jersey? She was just like, nah, I'll wear a Cincinnati jersey.
Hey, we love true Philly fans like Kylie Kelce for sure.
Just ride or die. I love it. But
now, at one guard spot, I mean Landon Dickerson, that's a lock, right? You're good there.
And we feel good about that contract too, by the way, especially with these recent guard signings. Resetting that market was not so bad.
Quinn Myers, man, good for him.
I know, right?
From lumberjacking in Wisconsin to $80 million man.
It's crazy. Good for him though, for sure.
Oh, dude, love Quinn Myers, dude. Like, just imagine walking into a bar in like Wisconsin in the backwoods, and you're just like, that dude's worth $80 million, and just sitting there pounding PBRs for 6 hours straight.
That sounds like awesome.
sounds like a great time.
Yeah.
But so at the other guard spot, I mean, you got Tyler Steen, or you might have Mekhi Becton kicking inside.
Yeah. Mekhi Becton is so strong. Like,
dude,
I don't know if he likes football, but like, my God, like his rookie year with New York was like, when he wanted to play, he was treating grown men like toddlers out there. It was a sight to behold. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
size,
if he wants to play, like,
I mean, there's no doubt he has the tools. Yeah, he has the tools, the athleticism, the size. He has everything you're looking for and more. Like, that's really big for a guard.
Yeah.
And listen, I don't think Steen is necessarily ready yet. He didn't look very good in the limited snaps that he had last year. And again, in Stoutland we trust. That O-line has proven time and time again that it can be successful with really anyone that's in there, and everyone gets better when they're on that team. But I would love to see Becton. Like we said, Becton at loving football, doing his thing. That's what I'd love to see. I don't know if it's
being 50 pounds overweight.
Yeah, exactly.
So if Becton isn't able to stay healthy there, though, I almost wonder, like, so here's my opinion on Steen, and this is my opinion from last year's draft. It was like, he reminded, actually, very similar to, if any listeners are familiar with Jordan Morgan out of Arizona this year. Very similar. I think he's a really nice finesse tackle, but his arms are just too short to play tackle. And finesse tackles are not guards. They don't eat glass. They're not mean. They're not angry. They're not overpowering people. And that's where I get stuck with Tyler Steen at guard. I'm like, I just don't see the personality fit there, the play style fit there. But I think Trevor Keegan, he's a 5th round pick, so I want to pump the brakes a little. But if Mekhi Becton went down, I would want to see Trevor Keegan in there.
I totally agree. And I do think if he goes, hopefully he doesn't, and hopefully he does great and doesn't have to be replaced. But I think that if that does happen, I could see that happening like week 13, week 14, after he's got some time and some, training through the offensive line and understanding what he needs to do. I would love to see that.
But all in all, I mean, I think this O-line, like you said, I agree with your assessment of there might be some issues up the middle with it, with Jurgens, and whether it be Steen or if it's Becton, I actually feel really good about it. If he can stay healthy and on the field and motivated, like, I feel like this O-line becomes just a massive strength at that point, because I just think so highly of Becton from when he has been on the field. It's just always that question of, will he be out there? Will he be motivated? But without assuming that he's going to go through his normal course of a season, which is, maybe 5-6 games and then misses most of the rest of the season. I do agree that center right guard spot is a weak spot that I think defenses are just going to attack hard at. Now, what are your overall expectations for this team?
Yeah, I mean, this team kind of feels Super Bowl or bust. It has the makings of it. Yeah, I knew you were gonna say that. I alley-ooped you on that one for sure. But I mean, that's kind of where we're at. I mean,
I think they're one of 5 teams that can win it in the NFC. So,
and they're talented enough. They have the roster.
I think the NFC is so top heavy this year. I mean, I think we're looking at Eagles, Cowboys, 49ers, which has kind of been the case for the past 5 years. And then I think like a Bears or a Packer can make Lions also up there. So, I mean, I think there's about 5 or 6 teams really with Super Bowl aspirations. Luckily for the Bears, they're so young that if they can,
they're coming though.
If they can climb that mountain, then it's just icing on the cake. But yeah, I mean, I think we're looking at about 6 teams in the NFC that really, really have a chance, to where you look at the AFC and it's like you can name 9 or 10 that are like, wouldn't surprise me. Like, but I think we got some playoff teams, some young teams in the NFC. But I mean, I think it really comes down to about 5 or 6, and Philly's one of those that if it's not one of those teams, I think they would all consider it a failure on the season if they don't at least make a conference championship / Super Bowl appearance. So,
and Sam,
sure.
I'm going to push back a little bit on Super Bowl or bust, because I look at this roster and I see a team that could theoretically win a Super Bowl, but more than that, I see a team who I think is a year away. I see a team who
totally
needs some more seasoning at cornerback.
But is Lane Johnson back next year?
O-line.
Well, hopefully we have two Aussie tackles. We have that Laken Vakahali.
I think in a year with Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell experience and Cam Jurgens settling in the center role, even without Lane Johnson, I think that team is more ready.
My concern is, I think the window right now is 3 years. And so at least, look, I kind of said that a little bit in jest of the Super Bowl and bust, but I do have that high of an expectation for this team to at least make a significant playoff run. But I do think if by 3 years from now we don't make it to the Super Bowl and or win, it's trouble.
Mm-hmm. Because then you start to run into need to pay more money to A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith both, and Jalen Carter's extension is coming up. And
then 3 years from now, if Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are both good, you got both of them right on the brink of getting paid. Saquon will be out the door by then, which running back is replaceable. But
Jalen Hurts,
not at that level.
New contract.
Yeah, it's
so I mean, I agree with the 3-year window, but anybody that's good, it's always a 3-year window, and Philly always seems to figure it out. So, I mean, your window has been open for 9 years, and you got a Super Bowl out of it, which is more than I can say. So, they always find a way to keep cracking that window open. So, I wouldn't cap it at 3 years, but maybe this iteration of the team, maybe 3 years.
Sure.
But for all we know, they're going to have another All-Pro quarterback next year when Jalen Hurts hits the bed this season. So.
Yeah,
that's just how it works.
Yeah,
I don't make the rules. I just suffer through
them. No doubt.
All right. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to tell everyone where they can find your work? Anything you want to put a highlight on? We dropped an article inside of the YouTube description. Make sure to go check it out. It's about Kellen Moore's offense against the blitz. Very well done by Sam here. So, Sam, take it away.
Oh, thank you. I just want to first off say I'm really appreciative of the opportunity. It was really fun spending some time talking with you guys and just talking ball.
I had a blast.
Yeah, it was a great time. And you can find me on Twitter, Sam_Finkel. You can find me on Inside the Birds, and that's mostly where my content is. But I definitely really enjoyed this. And listen, I love talking football, but especially love talking the Eagles. So I'm very appreciative.
No, we appreciate it, man. I wish you all the personal success that one can achieve, and hope you have a miserable season. So thank you so much for coming on.
I appreciate the first half of that, especially.
Yeah, man. I hope personally, man, you just go out there and kill it and just have the great time. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. You as well.
All right. Thanks, Sam. We'll talk to you later. All right.
That was good. You wanna break down the wins and losses real quick? I'll be right back.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm gonna talk through these bets here. And if I'm looking at these bets, like, honestly,
I like the under.
Win the division. It's the only one I like, just because the Cowboys can't win 2 years in a row. That's a rule.
Yeah. The only thing that worries me about that, I do agree with the back-to-back in the NFC East. I'm just terrified of the Commanders in that spot and laying minus 120.
Okay.
Just at minus 120. I mean, I think this is a 10-win team, and the under being at plus money, I think that's pretty good value.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, I think I have them at 10-7. So the under, I didn't even think about that plus money. That makes sense.
Yeah, but that would be my only thing is they could very well not win the division, and the Cowboys also not win the division. And you have 3 teams at 10 wins. I mean, we'll talk about the Commanders next, I guess. But yeah,
we're talking Dallas next.
Oh, okay, Dallas next. Okay, yeah, you want to run through the schedule? I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure. So first one, we both got the Packers taking the Eagles week 1 in, I believe, Mexico City, or no, Brazil. Yeah, I think Brazil. But we got the Packers beating them there. We both do, and then week 2. We have the 3rd straight year where Kirk Cousins is coming to Philadelphia in week 2. He's lost each of the last 2 times. We think it's going to be a 3rd. Week 7, we have the Saquon revenge game. And Jay's got the Eagles there. I actually have the Giants in this one. I just think they're going to get up for it. I think that their interior D-line, or their total D-line, is a bit of a problem. I think Dexter Lawrence might wreak some havoc in this game. I think the Giants are going to win a weird game, because the Giants have to win some football games, folks. Then in week 9, we're just going through some high points here in the schedule. We're not necessarily going 1 through 18, but we got the Jaguars coming to Philly. Doug Peterson returns to the Link. Sunday Night Football. Both Jay and I think the Eagles win that one. Week 12. This is the Eagles' final flight of the regular season. The rest of their road games, they take a bus to, because they're going to Baltimore and they're going to DC. Those are both short areas. Like, that is one way where the travel aspect of the schedule, I think, plays in big, because over the last...
Yeah, because they're all 5 miles away from each other. Yeah. They're all the same place.
Yeah, over the last 6 games of the season, the Eagles don't get on an airplane. That matters. So, and then week 18, another Saquon revenge game, which Jay has the Giants winning. I have the Eagles. So we both think the Giants win one. It's just a question of where.
Yeah, when and where, but
yeah. And then overall, we've both got them going 10-7. Obviously, I have that 10-7 winning the division, because the Cowboys aren't allowed to win 2 years in a row.
Yeah, the Cowboys also have won less than 10 games in this era of Cowboys outside of the back injury here. Yeah.
You need to be more like a dog. We don't need a bunch of cats in here looking in the mirror. Do I look good? I got my extra bands on. I got my other shoes on. We need more dogs.